Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Adam Dorsey, a psychologist in Silicon Valley, and I am the host of Super Psyched, a podcast dedicated to supercharging your life. Each episode contains fun, high-quality interviews with experts looking at psychology from all angles. Super Psyched is your tool to get more of what you want in your life and less of what you don't. Imagine the people who have most influenced your life. If you gave it some thought, I speculate that at least one teacher should be on that list. Teachers are so important in our lives, and their teachings go beyond the subject matter of the classes they teach. They can be role models. They can teach us how to think. They can bring out our best, and so much more. Yet, on average, we take classes from teachers, and we move on without really knowing who they are or how hard they've worked. What compels a person to teach? What's it like to be in front of the class? And what has it been like to teach during COVID? These and many other questions are answered by my guest, fifth grade teacher, Mr. Zack Sleep. Mr. Sleep earned his master's degree in education at the University of Pennsylvania, and he has brought his passion for teaching to Vietnam, Northern Philadelphia, and where he now teaches, in Silicon Valley. He also created an after-school program called The Young Detectives, an immersive mystery-solving experience in which children employ the cognitive processes of learning to crack codes, assessing alibis, and synthesizing evidence. I have witnessed Mr. Sleep's brilliance in real time. I am a fan of his work, and you'll hear why I positively had to interview him. So listen in as Mr. Sleep and I talk about the behind-the-scenes world of the modern teacher. Mr. Zack Sleep, welcome to Super Psyched.
Oh, I'm super psyched to be here. I trust no one's ever said that response to you before.
It's actually at first, everybody has been super unpsyched up until now, but I'm glad to finally have somebody who's super psyched to be with me. Dude, I'm a fan of your work. Several years ago, the very first time I saw you, you came out at an assembly to call all takers in your program called The Young Detectives. And I thought to myself, this is a guy who knows how to connect with kids. I hope and pray that someday my son gets to be taught by him. And of course, I saw you teach during that very weird year that was half in person, and then suddenly COVID hit. And somehow when I would watch you on video, I thought to myself, this guy knows how to do it. So we'll be talking about that. I was very conscientious in my choice. I'm a huge fan of all the teachers at the school, the best teachers I've ever seen in my life. You know, my wife and I have often said, oh, I wish that we had our children's teachers because they are the best. How did you, and when did you, and why did you decide to become a teacher?
I sort of got into working with kids before I got into working as a formal teacher. I was a summer camp counselor. I'm going to try not to do too much bragging. I was the best counselor who ever walked the earth because I loved it so much, because I was so in love with the job. And it's at this golden age in your life where you're 17, you're 18, you're discovering all these awesome counselors your age, you're discovering this world beyond your little high school bubble. And every morning at 8:30 in the morning, you know, we'd put on these skits for the kids. It'd be like, welcome to camp. We're going to sing these songs and we're going to perform the skit. And I would play all these different characters and I would give everything to it. One of the first sounds that I heard in my morning at 8:30 in the morning was 200 kids laughing. And that was just like the elixir of life for me. Like, it was the greatest feeling in the world. And it just happened to be that I just loved those conversations with those people. Kids have a knack for asking the exact right question all the time, every time. And it's fun to be able to provide answers, and it's fun to be able to learn from them. So I just fell in love with that job, and I was like, there's no pathway that I'm going to take that's going to lead me away from working with kids. So teaching seemed sort of like a natural choice, but I kind of lucked into this particular job.
And what's interesting is you have clearly a very alive inner child, and yet you are very adult, and yet your business partners are fifth graders. You literally work with children and need to rely on the kindness of children and that they comport themselves in a particular manner. What's it like to day in and day out coordinate with children and establish that kind of trust, that kind of coordination, so that there is an understanding you are willing to be silly and funny and yet hold the line, and that you are in fact the teacher?
Well, it's really incredibly difficult all the time. And you screw up a lot. You fail and you fail and you fail and you fail. That's the muscle that gets the strongest, is this failure muscle of like, I screwed up, but I'm getting back up. I think it's really important for teachers to have super high expectations for their kids, and not in a way that makes it hard for them to succeed, but I think in a way that is their due. I think children, no matter what the age, want to be seen as competent, want to be seen as capable, and they will recognize that. They have better instincts than we do when it comes to this. They will recognize that immediately in their interlocutor if the person does not see that in them. So it is an honest thing when I say to a child, look, I expect this of you, or this is where we need to be today. It is not any sort of projection or anything like that. It's tough to get everything in sync and working together. But I think if your expectation as a teacher is that everything will go just so, it's setting yourself up for a disaster. You want your chaos to move in a nice, organized fashion. And I think it's important to humble yourself before you walk in the door and help your kids humble themselves as well.
I think that's so important. And what you're actually modeling for the children is a healthy relationship with failure. And one of the things that we know is that Michael Jordan missed 9,000 shots. And there was Reggie Jackson, one of the great home run kings in the baseball's Hall of Fame, had more strikeouts than any other player, but we don't talk about that. And if we were so brittle that we couldn't tolerate the failures, we wouldn't rise to these levels. And one of the things that you do in the classroom is you adjust your expectations accordingly, and it works.
And what you're articulating is sort of, and I guess appropriately so, maybe the difference between a child and a young adult, or a child and an adult. I think it has nothing to do with physical growth. For me, it's this idea of accepting failure, accepting not necessarily blame, but responsibility in everything. And I think you see with a lot of kids, their instinct is, this happened because this happened because this, and so did this, and the earth is upside down. And I want to help them find the courage to say, my bad, I screwed up. I'm better than this. I know I'm better than this. And ultimately, that's self-respect. That is the very definition of respecting yourself, to know that you're capable of something more.
Wow. And the idea of wanting to be seen as competent, you're talking about children wanting to be respected as people. And I think about that great quote that they shined from David Bowie in Breakfast Club. These children that you spit on, they're quite aware of what they're going through. And you connect with them and you model failure and repair all the time. You do it with an incredibly good sense of humor. And I think that's so crucial. And that's something that is really hard to teach. I see you do it. You're constantly seeming to walk that balance between humor and respect. And that seems to also keep their attention. I asked my son, what makes Mr. Sleep such a good teacher? And he said he treated us like people. That was right from the mouth of babes. So
I like the way you said that, a balance between respect and humor. In a lot of ways, those two things, I think, are synonymous with one another. But yeah, I try really hard. It's very inglorious, the act of teaching. A lot of it is the tedium of what you do behind the scenes and screwing up and feeling self-conscious and feeling like you're not there for the kids enough, disappointing the kids, disappointing yourself, your expectations. It's a lot of that missing shots, right? Striking out. And to have a sense of humor about it is giving yourself the respect you need to deal with it.
Let's talk about you as a fledgling teacher. I imagine you went through the imposter syndrome to some extent. Let's hear a little bit about that. What was that like? How did you tolerate it? Perhaps even a story that really illustrates the point.
Well, for sure. I think it hit me pretty bad. I think I'm not philosophizing. I think you know more, but I think everybody, for the most part, almost everybody I've met, their greatest strength is kind of a flip side to their greatest weakness. And for me, you know, I always felt like my greatest strength was my charisma, sense of humor. And the flip side of that was my greatest weakness, which is I needed everyone to like me. This was a compulsion. And I'm not hyperbolizing when I say that. If somebody honked their horn on the freeway at me, I would think about it for 2 weeks. I'm like, man, this guy, he doesn't like me and he's going to drive away. I'm never going to see this person again. He's going to forever not like me. And that was sort of the value that I originally took out of teaching, which is the camp counselor mentality, which is I got to get all these kids to like me.
Totally.
And I didn't realize until I went to teach in Philadelphia, which is its own thing, that this thing that I placed the most value in was actually completely outside of my control. And I couldn't control whether they liked me or they didn't like me. At the end of the day, that was their decision. And I think there was a time, I mean, I'll tell you that I had a tough time in Philly. That's where I did my master's degree in education. That's where I did my teaching practice. I taught in Kensington neighborhood, and it was really tough. I mean, it would be a criminal understatement to say that that was a traumatic experience in a lot of ways for me, and definitely for those kids who are living in one of the most afflicted neighborhoods in the country in terms of guns and drugs and violence. And they're just super resilient, but it was hard. And I was working till 2 a.m. every night on the graduate stuff and trying to prepare these lessons and waking up at 6 and going to work. And I will never forget the moment where my mentor teacher, the one training me, and she's tough as nails. She has this stoic, icy wrath, and she's a great teacher. Yeah. She's different than me. She's a great teacher. She said to me these words: "You are not cut out for this. You will never be a good teacher." It was a critical blow for me because this is like a few years after I had already developed the sense that I was a good teacher working with kids at the school I currently work at. And I just remember coming home and this realization hit me. And I think to this day, it is the biggest realization that I've ever made, which was this person might never believe in me, but what's the point? I don't even believe in myself. So at least give myself that. Believe in myself a little bit. And it sounds so trite, but it was that moment where I was like, wow, I am waiting for all these people to believe in me, to believe that I can be a good teacher, an effective teacher. And I won't even give that courtesy to myself. So I did not go back and do homework. I did not go back and plan lessons. I remember that afternoon, I took the train and I went to the clothing store. I went to like Uniqlo and I got all these clothes and I started looking fresh and feeling myself. I am a good teacher. I know I'm a good teacher. I don't need anybody's assent. I don't need anybody's approval. And I went back the next day and it was a great day. It was the only day of that year up until that point where I felt like I had control of the classroom because I had control of my own self-perception.
So what were the aphorisms, mantras, and other ideas that might have been helping you fuel your conviction that you, in fact, were responsible and could fuel your own sense of agency as a teacher?
I think it's really important. I think all teachers come to this realization at some point. The sooner, the better, for sure. I think you need to understand when it comes to the kids that whatever problems they are going through, they are not the problem. There was not a single day in Philadelphia where a child did not walk up to me and curse at me directly and call me Mr. this or Mr. that, insert whatever curse word or whatever you want. At the beginning,
I really did. I can imagine.
I mean, it's all they're even. I had to learn a new vocabulary.
Totally.
Philadelphia to keep up with them. And at the beginning of the year, I was like, "How dare you speak to me? Nobody can possibly affront my dignity." And I was like, "Wow, that's not working." They just keep coming back, and they just keep coming, and they just keep. Well, it's because they can see that they get this activation of me every time they say it, and I just kind of realized at some point, I don't know when it was, maybe around the same time as this other realization, that they're doing this because their lives are really hard. And it's not easy being a kid. And it's definitely not easy being a teenager. And it's super, super hard in any neighborhood, let alone that kind of neighborhood. This kid is reaching out for help. They are not the problem. Their problems are the problem. And you have to respect the gravity of those problems. And after a while, anytime they walked up to me and started saying, hey, Mr. F word or Mr. this or Mr. that, I would just say, I'm sorry you're having a rough day. Let me know if I can do anything to help you. And after that point, these kids who were calling me these names started coming into my classroom at lunch, and we started doing essay workshops and helping them apply to different high schools and different like trade schools in the area. And I turned this thing that I thought was like a weakness into a strength by not taking it personally. I promise you it's never personal. So that was a huge like realization for me. Like, I don't have to be this impervious person that always gets to be on top in every situation and his authority never erodes in front of the kids. If you're thinking in this kind of calculus, you're really weak because you're never comfortable in the classroom. When you forget about all this and you're like, okay, this kid, this is my project. I want to help you. I don't care what you call me. I'm not taking it personally. It's not about me. It's about you. And then you can make that mental switch and make progress. So that's a big one.
That's huge. And if you'd been brittle or if you'd been resistant, it would have been bad. Instead, you chose to do what we call in motivational interviewing, which is a great modality for treating addictions and other behavioral issues. It's called rolling with the resistance. And that's exactly what you did when they called you Mr. F instead of Mr. Sleep. You just rolled with the resistance. You're like, hey, that's right. I'm Mr. F.
And then I was like, keep it coming. Let me hear what other good names you got. Hey, you got to workshop this. This one's not hurting me enough. Come on, you can do better. I want 3 new curse words for me on my desk tomorrow morning. And then it was like, okay, we can't break this guy.
So then they would just said, all right, let's just chill and be with this guy. And one of the other aphorisms that I'm sure you've come across is people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And then as they saw your humanity, I imagine that they felt cared about.
I think so. But I mean, it was a battle to get to that point because I was so consumed with this idea of having to present myself a certain way to them and having to be this very autocratic, strong pedagogue, and that I just forgot who I was. I'm not icy, stoic, wrath, teacher, dictator. I'm me. I do my way. And this is the reason why if you're a 7-foot tall football player, if you're a 5-foot tall, little lady or gentleman, you can control a classroom because they know what authenticity is, and they will respect someone who is a tiny little person and loves classical music and can't stop talking about their favorite anime show more than they will respect the humongous, strong, authoritative person that rings false to them.
Totally. As you're speaking, I'm recalling my time as a postdoctoral intern. I was working with gang-affiliated youth who were all on juvenile probation, and one of them called me mijo. And I was looking at him, I was like, dude, I am old enough for your dad. You're calling me son. I gave him kind of an icy stare, and I said, it's Dr. Dorsey. Thinking that would be the right way. Like, this is the part of the movie where I get them to start respecting me. And lo and behold, what I was disabused of the entire time was that's totally not the way to connect. The job was to smile and say, oh, mijo, okay, all right. And I learned that over time. As soon as I started rolling with the resistance and chilling out and being the authority, not losing that, but also doing it with that lovely humor, kind of that equilibrium that we were talking about between respect and humor, it all came together. It's interesting to hear that that was a similar finding of your own. And my own imposter syndrome, too, similarly, was cured in part by changing my clothes. It was kind of a sartorial choice. So yeah, and stepping into the clothes of me as psychologist. So it sounds like Uniqlo was part of that. Yeah, for sure. And mine happened to have been Banana Republic at the time. So what have been some mantras and sayings that have really continued to fuel you along the way?
I used to say to myself to believe in my own experience. And that was like one of the big anchors that I had. And then my friend, who he's a wonderful guy. He was our PE coach. He's living in Austin now. He rips on guitar. He's an absolute boss. He just had a baby, which you didn't.
Oh, I did not know.
Beautiful blue-eyed baby. Awesome guy. Just awesome guy. He said, and this is exactly how he talks. You should not say you believe in your own experience. You should say that you trust in your own experience. And I was like, oh, go on, say more in your velvety voice. And he would explain that belief requires this promise of something to come, whereas trust is like, it's already here. I have it. I'm grounded to it. I'm anchored to it. And I think belief is great. And I'm not criticizing belief. But I think everybody goes through their own experience in life, and it's hard. And there's nothing easy, nothing given. Trust in that experience. On day one of teaching, the sticker collector or Russian ice fishing champion has just as much clout as the reigning teacher of the year. And if you believe in that experience and trust that it is relevant and has uniquely prepared you for this moment, which, let's face it, no piece of paper can prepare you for, no degree can prepare you for the challenge of getting 20 10-year-olds to listen at the same time. It's just as good as anything. And I think that's super, super powerful. From without, this guy is literally a vending machine of mantras, but my hero is Muhammad Ali. I think Muhammad Ali is a polymath. I think when I think polymaths, I think Leonardo da Vinci and I think Muhammad Ali. He was the greatest athlete of his time. He was the greatest speaker of his time. He was the greatest musician, rapper of his time. He was the greatest public speaker of his time. He was the greatest public figure of his time. He negotiated a hostage situation. He's just a Superman, and he did it all under the yoke of a society that was politicized against him and African Americans. And he did it all somehow with this beautiful chiseled smile on his face. And the guy was something special. So he's a quote machine, but I think his attitude about life and that all these punches that he took, political punches, literal punches, his attitude was, you can't break me. I'm here for it. I want to be here for it. He was just transcendent. He's a polymath. He's like a Leonardo da Vinci to me.
He actually is quoted as having the shortest poem ever written on the spot.
We. I teach poetry every year. And this is one of the places that I start, which is, poems, abstract definition. It's hard to pin down what a poem is. Muhammad Ali, famously, I think it was a Harvard graduation speech, said, me, we. And I always kind of taught that as like, see, here you go. Poems can be short. And that was kind of my thesis about that. I don't know what it was. It was one day, I think I wrote it on the board and I was like pointing to it and I put an arrow from me to we. And I was like, okay, this is brilliant because that's what graduating is. It's going from me, this me mentality to a we mentality. And I don't know if Muhammad Ali intended all that or whatever. The guy's a genius. Of course he intended it, but something about that just spoke to me.
Well, I'm going to take us back to the idea of you keeping the attention of 20 10-year-olds, and it was really put to the test when COVID came on. You had to do it in a way that was unprecedented for teachers who preceded you, and that was via video. And I can't even imagine the challenge imposed on teachers during that time. How did you keep their attention through Zoom?
Well, I failed a lot. It's kind of like, I don't know, somebody said this, but it's like being the producer, actor, and director of your own movie. And you got to get all these other people on board to it. It required a lot of energy. It required a lot of work. Most of all, it required a determination on my part to enjoy it. I never once said to myself, this is going to stink. Teaching on Zoom is going to be bad. Of course, it's not ideal. Of course, kids should be in an environment where they can socialize and get scraped knees and this and that. But I never let my attitude drift to, okay, well, this is going to be a lost year. I took full advantage of it. I realized that I had a special medium. I had the ability to share my screen. I created all these crazy activities for them. I created a whole guess who elaborate game. Again, I screwed up a lot. There were many, many times where the kids just were disengaged and I couldn't do anything about it. So-and-so group wouldn't work. But the thing that allowed us to get through that year, and in my opinion, get through it pretty well, I feel like the kids did great, was this overwhelming determination on our part to enjoy it and to not feel bad for ourselves. We have this rare opportunity to learn. There are kids in other countries who, without exaggeration, hike miles just to get to a place where they can have a signal in order to tap into some education. We're in an incredibly fortunate situation, and it should not be taken for granted. So I just kind of had that mentality of, let's just another challenge and let's go for it. And yeah, I cooked up some lessons that were great for that kind of stuff, but it was all about the mentality, and the kids were interested enough in that, and they brought that energy too. So we made it through.
You most certainly did. And it sounds like you were nimble, you adjusted, and most importantly, it sounds like you set the tempo at the beginning by
work fast, think fast, be creative, be spontaneous, and just go for it. And I mean, that's what it was. I felt like I was one of those YouTubers that like spam information at you, but I was competing with Roblox. I was competing with Among Us. I was competing with their Nintendo Switch. I had to be dynamic, controversial, spontaneous, and quick and pacey and very, very quick. So that's kind of what it was. And I was like, well, I might as well enjoy it on the way.
It's so great. And to that point, one of the things that blows me away about all teachers is that they must be on for the vast majority of the teaching hour. It's not like you can just kind of black out and just kind of chill and allow something else to go on. You are on. If you say you taught for 8 hours, you were on for 8 hours. It's a very different 8 hours than another type of 8 hours. And I'm just wondering, what is it like to be on so much of the day? Do you drive home just like exhausted, deflated? Like, what's it like?
Yes, I drive home exhausted. I try not to get too deflated, although it definitely happens a lot. It requires a tremendous amount of energy. It requires a tremendous amount of coffee. It requires a lot of love, but it's kind of like this feeling of being on your podcast right now. Like my heart is racing, but at the same time, like I can't forget to enjoy it. And I think after a while, you sort of develop this coolness, and I'm not saying I'm cool. You develop a coolness about it that comes from this place of joy. It's a really funny thing if you take a step back and like look at what you're doing. Like this 6'4" dude is explaining to all of these kids how fractions work. It is a bizarre thing.
I've seen you. You are a towering 6'4" giant in front of a whole bunch of kids.
Oh yeah. And you'd be shocked at how easy it is to ignore the towering 6'4" giant who's trying to get you to write down your homework. I don't know. I think a lot of people need certain things in their careers. I've got a lot of friends that need a lot of quiet space for creativity and certain things. I need to be intellectually challenged and engaged all the time. And if what you seek is to be intellectually challenged, you should surround yourself with children. They will challenge you at every moment, all the time. So I will not allow myself to be bored. And what better profession than teaching in order to accomplish that?
I could not agree more. What have the children taught you?
I'm going to answer your question in the most direct way. Humility. I think that's the best thing that I've gotten from this. You look at these kids, you look at them making mistakes and not getting how to spell their name correctly. And you were that kid. You for sure were that kid. I was that kid. We were all that kid. It's very humbling to be surrounded by these people who have such an appreciation and such a sense of wonder. And make no mistake about it. Yeah, you can say we're older, we have more clout, we have this and that. Those kids, what they see with their eyes is 1,000 times more vivid, more expressive, and in many ways more intellectual than what we see, taking nothing away from us super impressive adults who purchase our own Reese's Pieces anytime we want.
Right.
Yeah, it's super humbling to be around them. And this is no secret, but teachers often don't know the subject matter that they're about to teach. So just being a teacher puts you in a position of having to learn at an incredible rate and having to do the impossible, which is take that knowledge, package it and deliver it in a way that it is accessible and enjoyable for these young minds to learn, and do it in a nimble way within the scope of 45 minutes. It almost sounds like an impossible joke that somebody came up with. And we're like, well, let's give it a shot.
And you do it on the regular. And one of the great findings in psychology is this concept called flow, something that Michael Jordan, because I know you and I are clearly both fans, and you're familiar with flow. flow is that, just for the listener, is that experience where that 45 minutes that you're teaching goes by in an instant. You're so engaged, you're in the zone, and it's usually considered the byproduct of two overlapping circles in kind of this beautiful Venn diagram of meaning, meeting, challenge. And what you're describing is that you've chosen a life as a teacher in which flow will be present for you, given who you are and what you care about. As a former camp counselor and as someone who really enjoys the synergy of being with children and that dynamic of give and take, it's perpetually calling you to show up with your best stuff. So you sink a lot of time into creating amazing stuff for the kids to absorb. But in the process, perhaps instead of being depleted and discouraged at the end of the day, you're exhausted and a castle that's been reduced to rubble, but you feel so well spent.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. That was a beautiful metaphor. It's great. I mean, when you see them in their flow state, though, that is something else when you feel that. And that's tough as a teacher to facilitate that. And especially with the group of kids who are very different. But I think that's something that I don't think you can teach someone to find it, but I think you can open pathways towards making it easier.
Absolutely. But speaking of difficult, I imagine that a challenge that every teacher across the country faces is dealing with parents. And I imagine the parents at times. I mean, I imagine that there are easy interactions with parents, and I imagine that there are well-intended parents who may at times communicate with teachers in a manner that might somehow be less than efficient or less than optimal. And I'm wondering if you were to give a tip to parents for how they could really optimize their teacher interactions, what would that be?
I'm going to say this, and it has nothing to do with grammar and syntax and the hard bits of what you write or what you say. It has to do with a mental disposition that I would certainly recommend to all adults and definitely all parents. Disclaimer, I am not a parent. I have nothing but respect for people that do that job. Respect to you, Adam. It is, from what I can tell, a very difficult job, and I have nothing but respect for that. It's okay for your child to have failed. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And understanding that can be one of the hardest things in my experience for parents to grasp. And I think most of I've taught in different contexts. And in Philly, this wasn't the context. And I taught in Vietnam, and that wasn't the context. But in this context that I'm teaching in now, this seems to be the overwhelming theme, which is my child has purportedly failed. But of course, that wasn't a failure because so-and-so influenced, so-and-so did this, and so-and-so did that. So please reverse time and make it so that failure never happened, or my child. Then we're depriving your child from the opportunity of growing. So I think that's where I would start is it's fine to fail. It's fine for your kid to fail. It's fine for your kid to be wrong. It's fine for your kid to have done the wrong thing. Avoiding problems is going to be a worse strategy than overcoming them. And I think we need to develop, especially nowadays, we need to develop in our youngsters, our scholars, a tenacity for facing, overcoming their problems. And I think some parents have the instinct to create a mechanism for avoiding or erasing a problem. And it's just not going to work. That's categorically not going to work.
You know, you're speaking to the idea of growth and repair after things go wrong. And former guests who you would love, he's a professor of education, Luke Reynolds, who talked all about failure. And then I also think about, in terms of just learning from it and growing from it and becoming better as a result of it. I mean, I think about my own trajectory, and perhaps yours was similar. One of my worst years ever was fifth grade, the class you teach. And I was in special ed with, basically, for those who remember Welcome Back, Kotter, I was with the Sweat Hogs, and things did not go very well for the majority of us. But in a way, I'm glad to have that in my rearview mirror as a reference point. And then I think about the TV show Lost. My son and I are watching that. I'm just enjoying it for the second time. Right. And there's a scene where Locke is with a chrysalis. He's with a cocoon. And he says, I could cut open this cocoon and the moth would die because it hadn't fought to survive. It needs to get itself out of the cocoon in order to survive out in the world. And I thought that was a really good metaphor. And that's what you're speaking to about the failure. Like, the lesson goes way more meta. It gets way bigger than this thing that we're ostensibly teaching them. It's the process, not just the outcome for this particular drill that we're doing.
Yeah. I don't know what it's like to watch your child fail at something. I've never had to have that experience. I don't have kids. It's got to be a really, 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 really hard. It's also a very worthy experience in some cases. And obviously we intervene when things get to a point. But you overcame that situation, and you know you can be resilient in any situation where you fail or things aren't going well because you've done it before. That's in your experience. And to deprive kids of all those experiential touch points where they failed and overcome, it is depriving them of the capacity to overcome failures when they really get to be super intimidating and tough. And that's part of preparing scholars and preparing youngsters, is, I would say, more so than anything. I mean, they're going to forget 1492 pretty soon. This lesson needs to stick.
Totally. And you're also speaking about frustration tolerance, which is so crucial to later success, because we will get frustrated, we will fail, and we need to persist and press on. To borrow from the great Winston Churchill, press on, baby. You got to keep going. Let's talk about your time overseas, because you did spend some time teaching in Vietnam, and I'd love to hear what that was like, and perhaps how that may have taught you as an educator by learning from a different culture.
It was very hard. That is what I know for sure. I am not comparing my situation to the people that, live there and all this stuff. And I'm going to say some awesome things, but it was really hard for me. I was this 24-year-old kid, really. I flew out there. I started teaching in the middle of the rural heart of the country in a small town village called Hon Lao, Vietnam. And I taught 7 days a week. I taught for 8 hours a day, and I taught classes of
7 days a week, 8 hours a day. Did I heard you correctly?
7 days a week, 8 hours a day. I negotiated for a half a day break at some point. Wow. I was like burnt out. I wasn't ready for this. And I taught students ages 5 to 55 in various classes all throughout the day. It was sacrilegiously hot outside all the time. I was hallucinating from the heat all the time. There are not enough fans in the entire country of Vietnam. That is something I know for sure. It was a hard environment to be in for a lot of other reasons. Vietnam is different than the United States in a historical sense, because when we want to see our history, usually what we do is we open a book, or we'll go online, or we'll go to a museum. These people have their history entrenched in the physical place. And you are walking around the street or the road or whatever, and you're hearing landmines being detonated from the war that are still there. You're seeing crumbled buildings that were destroyed, and you're seeing plenty of people with bullet wounds up and down their appendages. And Agent Orange is like very visible. It's very common to see people who are visibly changed physically from the residual effects of Agent Orange. So history was like an everyday reality for these people. However, they also just so happen to be, not a coincidence at all, the most resilient, optimistic, and gregarious people I've ever met. All the people that I met were super kind. There wasn't a single person's house I walked by where they didn't invite me in for dinner. And I look back at it as like one of the best times of my life was riding on my motorcycle through this unmapped, uncharted countryside and running into people 20 kilometers down the road that were rehearsing the same English chant that I taught their friend or cousin or whoever the day before. So it was humbling. It's a lot, man. Like, it's like the 12 plate, was it 10 plates of Moses? They were all happening. It was obvious where that story came from. People's experience. It would rain and all the time. Power would go out. It'd be super hot. That was the year the Formosa company in Taiwan dumped all this chemicals into the ocean. I saw millions of fish lapping up dead against the shore of the beach. And I remember asking these people, like, what do you do now? This is your entire economy, this fishing industry. And the answer they gave me was, it's just going to be worse from now on. It's not like we have a magic solution to these problems like you guys with your phones. Like, I got this app for this. They had to deal with it. They have this ingrained sense of resilience and awesomeness. And not everybody is. Of course, there are people that are super affluent there. But man, like, you just gain a lot of respect and appreciation. So I love Vietnam. I can't wait to go back. I'm in love with that country. It's special.
That's really extraordinary to hear. So pivoting just a little bit from Vietnam and kind of bringing it back to your experiences overall, what are some truths about being a teacher that might surprise people outside the profession?
Well, I'm going to say a positive and negative. The positive is we are athletes. We are dogs. What we do is, it's a wonder that we're not followed all the time by paparazzi. And I'm not inflating all these people, all these colleagues, teachers that I met, which were astronomically better than me. The logistics of what they were having to do with all these kids from different backgrounds and the amount of time you invest in just preparing to work, just being at home and preparing for the next day or the next month or whatever. It's outrageous. It's beyond fathoming. It's nothing that you can appreciate until you actually do it. So we are like superhuman in this capacity. And I think every profession has some aspect where they're like, wow, this is a superhuman. Obviously, every human is super, but we really dog it all the time. And I think if people got a sense of how much grit, tenacity you need for this job, there would be a lot more respect for the profession and maybe a couple extra dollars. I don't know, but really that's it. And then I guess my positive also has that negative flip side too, which is it's a physically exhausting job. Your body, your mind, the way you breathe, your energy. Exactly as you said, at the end of the day, it is completely sapped. Your willpower should not be, or usually is not, but it's a physically taxing job. If only for having to bend down to talk to children that are half my size. It's super taxing. So maybe that would surprise a lot of people. I just think it would surprise a lot of people to really get an appreciation for how good these people are, for how talented these people are, for how intellectual these people are. I have a friend that makes $1 million bajillion dollars a year. He got his own company, he pitches to Apple. He's got whatever. He's a superstar. Silicon Valley superstar. He saw one of the slideshows that I prepared for my kids and he says, wow, Zach, this slideshow is better than anything I've come up with. And I go, well, what do you expect? I have an unfair advantage against you. I have to maintain the attention span of 10-year-olds.
Totally.
So we are just very impressive people. And it sucks that I have to say that because I shouldn't say that. I should show that. I should do something dynamic to show you that. But I really mean it when I say it. Like, these people that I've watched, these incredible teachers in different neighborhoods that I've watched, they're superior athletes, intellectual athletes, physical athletes. They're superior. It's really awesome.
As you're speaking, I find myself remembering one of the great athletes. That would be Senor Davis, my Spanish teacher from high school. And it's interesting, just a side note, at my 20-year reunion, I asked a whole bunch of my fellow students, who was your favorite teacher? And by a large margin, people said Mr. Davis. And I asked them, did you ever thank him? Did you ever send him a gratitude letter? And without exception, none of them had. And they asked me if I had, and I said yes 3 times. And actually, just last night, I received a response from my music appreciation prof from college, with whom I've not been in touch since he taught. And he was so happy to hear from me. And he's now teaching at UCSB, and he's, just killing it. But yet I think about the thing that we're not talking about, and we're kind of talking around. And the thought that I had with Mr. Davis also in high school was, he's not paid nearly enough. And that is truth about the most valuable profession is not compensated in a manner that reflects the return on the investment of the energy of those producing. And I'm wondering, if you were to go up onto Capitol Hill and it was all on you to say something akin to pay us more, how would you close?
I would say that this is your only choice. This is the only answer. I mean, I listen to political radio all the time and now and always, but now I hear so much sense of despair. Like, how can we possibly come out of this? It's so funny how seldom the word education is brought up as a potential solution to that. I guess people think that kids cannot affect change. It is beyond a doubt that if you want to build a functioning society of quality people, morally engaged citizens with a high quality of life, you must, by definition, invest in education and in educators. This will not be an easy fix. You will not build a bridge or start a war that is going to suddenly lift us out of our whatever, despair and malaise. You need to invest your money in children. That is the most logical investment to make. They are already building this country, but they will be running this country. They will be doing everything or any country in the very near future. That is your only choice. There is no other choice. Everything else is just putting a nice little ornament on your Christmas tree. This is the roots of the tree. This is the most important part of the tree. Do not invest in children. Do not build a solid future. It's very simple. Invest in children, build a solid future. If you don't think that this is a self-evident fact, I feel bad for you.
Well, you need not feel bad for me because I think it's a self-evident fact and you make total sense. There's a part of me that wants to close on this, and yet I do want to ask you the magical question. So I will. Mr. Sleep, if you had suddenly the powers to confer upon all children one insight or one skill, or in fact, upon all humanity, one insight or one skill, what would that insight or skill be, and how do you imagine it would affect the individual as well as society at large?
I'm going to be a little redundant. When you fail, I bestow upon you the power to fail loudly and proudly. This is the only relevant, useful superpower as far as I'm concerned. And it would be awesome to see children wield it at such an early age, and it would be super awesome to see parents wield it as well. So I think that would be it. The power to instantly plant trees with laser vision from your eyes as well, and super helpful. So yeah, but we all know they'd be like graphing trees onto each other's skin and that kind of stuff. So
very cool. Well, Mr. Sleep, thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your heart, your brain, your time with me and my listeners of this podcast. This has been a total blast, and I've learned a lot.
I have been super psyched to be on this podcast there. I doubled down on my cheesy joke from the beginning.
Hey, man, if we learn nothing else, doubling down is a good call.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you as a mentor, as a father, as a psych, and as a podcaster now. I appreciate it all. And thank you for your time. And thank you to your listeners as well.
Right on, man. This is Dr. Adam Dorsey thanking you for listening to Super Psyched. If you know anyone who might like it or who might benefit from listening, share it. And if you like the episode, please hit subscribe